All right, so one battle after another is here. Paul Thomas Anderson's latest opus, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, and Chase Infinity. And this is one of the best movies of the year. I'm going to cut straight to it. This is a must-watch movie of the year. It's like Sinners. This is going to be at the top of everyone's list. Now, this isn't my personal favorite of the year, but it is definitely up there. It's definitely in the top 5. And for most people, this is going to be their favorite movie of the year. This is a 3-hour film that completely flies by. It's entertaining and funny, but most importantly, it's incredibly timely. This movie is full of social commentary. It is tackling really dark, uncomfortable, and disturbing ideas, but it does it in a very Coen Brothers-esque sort of way. And in fact, dare I say, as much as I love some of the Coen Brothers' best films, I think this movie feels like a really well done version of some of the quirky Coen Brothers films that didn't quite come together. This feels like a gritty, grounded version of a Coen Brothers caper. It feels like a dark mix of Raising Arizona and No Country for Old Men in the best way possible. The basic setup here, and I'm not going to tell you too much because I think the marketing actually did a really good job of showing this movie's visual language and its style. I thought the trailers with the music were actually really well done, but I'm not going to give away too much. All right, the bare bones plot here is a group of revolutionists, all right, led by Leonardo DiCaprio, disbanded, all right, and 16 years later, they are called into action yet again. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Bob, and he has to hit the road again and go on the run again because an old enemy from their revolutionary days is back. That's all I'm going to give away. The enemy in question is played by Sean Penn, and this is the best I've ever seen Sean Penn. Now, I will acknowledge, I haven't seen too much Sean Penn. I have seen I Am Sam, and the less said about that, the better. But Sean Penn's villainous character here, what I found interesting is I feel like he actually has kind of the most depth, the most character exploration in this whole thing. I found that really interesting. Between him and Tiana Taylor, who plays Bob's lover, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, I feel like they actually get the strongest and most interesting and most compelling characterization. I feel like you could write a thesis on Sean Penn's character and his levels of hatred and what he represents to the main characters, what he represents within this movie, and what he represents on behalf of America. He is an incredibly fascinating, compelling, and very funny villain as well, but he is consistently the butt of the joke. It's interesting. He's never intentionally funny. He's not busting out quippy one-liners, even the way like Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds was. No, he is consistently the butt of the joke, and it is made exponentially funnier by the fact he takes himself so seriously. But the expansive cast here is good as well. Again, I mentioned Tiana Taylor before, and as much as I would have loved a little more screen time from her, the screen time we get with her is electric and exciting, and it's also a character that you can slice many different ways. I'll get into it in the spoiler talk, but her allegiances, her loyalties, and also just where she lands on certain sides of things and what her motivations are, you can slice a bunch of different ways, and I found that really, really compelling. Now, Bob, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, is a lot more of a straightforward character. So is his daughter, played by Chase Infinity, and that is my one thing with this movie that I think I will need some time to marinate on. I do think that the characters we spend the majority of time with are a bit more straightforward. They're a bit more, their story and what they're doing, it's just a bit more streamlined. But in saying that, what the movie does well, though, is it makes them feel like a character as a duo, if that makes any sense. The big growth and the big emotional power for both Bob and his daughter Willa is when they are together and when they are apart. Now, I can't get into too much of it without getting into spoilers, but what I found effective was they are both very simple characters compared to Tiana Taylor's character and compared to Sean Penn's character. But what I found interesting is in this movie, it's that father-daughter bond is kind of the character development. That is the thing you really want to unpack and slice a couple different ways. I think it's really well done. The movie essentially turns into an extended chase sequence for essentially 2 hours, and it is completely gripping, funny, and just overall really effective. And what I liked is, even though this is a deceptively simple movie at times, it's also surprisingly deep in other times. I think the villain here represents so much about this sort of seedy underbelly of America. There is also a reveal about his allegiances and what he's doing it all for that is equal parts hilarious, but also horrifying if you actually really think about it well. I think what this movie does well is it's commenting on racism, it's commenting on deportation, immigration, how minorities are treated in America, fetishization of different cultures, and it does it in a way that's simultaneously hilarious and also horrifying. And I think the tonal balance here here is kind of a tightrope of perfection. Paul Thomas Anderson has always been good at kind of finding humor in really complicated, evil, sinister characters. Like There Will Be Blood is a really funny movie when you rewatch it. So is Phantom Thread, but the first go round, you're completely mortified by what you're seeing. And this movie kind of has the opposite. It's like funny as you're watching it. And then when you think about it later, you're like, oh, that was a really fucked up abuse of power. And oh, that was really messed up too. And oh my God. So yeah, guys, like, this is like the must-see movie of the year. This is a fantastic filmmaker, right, who has previously done things that don't bring in a massive budget, that don't bring in a massive amount of money, being given like $130 to $150 million to play with, and giving us a blockbuster that is equal parts hilarious, exciting, visceral, and I think we'll actually be studying it in the future. Like, I think it's saying a lot while also just being a really fun ride. I think you will be hard-pressed to find people that hate this movie, unless, frankly, they're Ben Shapiro. Now, before we get into spoiler talk, I will say I'm at a 9 out of 10 for this movie. It's not quite my favorite movie of the year. It's probably 4th or 5th, and I really wanted this to be a 10 out of 10. I've been seeing the insane reviews. I've seen the Letterboxd review, and I was left a little quiet afterwards because I was like, I absolutely loved it. My only thing is I wanted maybe a gut punch here or there. I wanted something that really hit me, but I also think the movie might not have been going for that. And this might be a matter of expectations, you know? I just watched There Will Be Blood and Phantom Thread recently, and that was a lot more sticky with its characters and a lot more to unpack. Whereas aside from the opening 30 to 40 minutes, I feel like this was a very straightforward movie to an extent. I'd heard going into it, there were a bunch of twists and turns, and I didn't find that as much. Maybe different audiences were surprised by certain reveals, but for me, they felt kind of inevitable. But more to the point of what I'm saying is I would have liked a little more development or a little more time spent with Leonardo DiCaprio's character and his daughter's character at the start before the big event, the big chase kicks off, for me to fully invest and have some like heartfelt moments and some gut punch moments later in the movie. But that's just me, all right? Like everyone else I was with didn't have that complaint at all. But when the movie wrapped up, I was like, that was a really entertaining, like incredibly well done ride. I just wish I had a little more to think about in regards to the ending in the drive home, because most of what I was thinking about, most of what I was unpacking, and most of what I was talking about with people were actually that first 30, 40 minutes before the main plot kicks in. That was the part I was most like, okay, so what do you think that says about her loyalties and his loyalties and this person and that person? That first 30, 40 minutes before the time jump, for me, was the part that I found so rich and interesting and morally complicated. Whereas after that point, it feels like that was almost a really good setup for an excuse for literally the best chase film you've ever seen, you know? And like, who am I to complain? It feels like I've been given a dish of caviar and perfectly cooked steak, and I'm being like, yo, the plates are kind of shitty, you know? So I fully understand. That's just my personal opinion, and I'm glad everyone's loving this. Like, if this is going to be most people's favorite movie of the year, I'm real happy about that. All right. I'm real happy about that. I also think this is going to be an Oscar frontrunner. And on top of that, like, I haven't actually mentioned how good the performances are here, but Sean Penn's on fire. Chase Infinity as Leo's daughter is incredible. Tiana Taylor is wonderful. By the way, I absolutely love the album she did with Kanye, KTSE. On top of that, Leonardo DiCaprio, right? It's not his most showy performance, dare I say. Like, this isn't one where he's giving like some insane heartfelt monologues. No one's going to take any of his scenes here and put them in those cringe TikTok acting montages the way they take that scene from Revolutionary Road where he's like, you're not even worth the energy it would take to hit you. You know, like, this isn't going to land in like generic acting montages, but I think that's because it's a really comedic performance, and I think people typically undersell how much effort it takes to do a good comedic performance. His physical comedy, all his mannerisms here are actually really kind of fantastic. It feels like an extension of what he was doing with Rick Dalton in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. In that movie, I remember he had this like kind of bloated, bloodshot eyes appearance. You know, he constantly looked like he was sniffling and like barely breathing and like a raging alcoholic. And Quentin Tarantino's talked about how he almost added this like BPD energy to that role. And I think what Leo does here that's really fantastic is he's known as a Hollywood heartthrob, but he's really leaning into this like Coen Brothers, Big Lebowski-esque vibe. And he talked about that in interviews. He was like, I'm playing someone who misses certain characters and is kind of resentful of certain characters, but I'm also trying to be a character that is completely out of it emotionally because he's constantly high. And I think he nailed it. And again, the physical performance here, everything he's doing with his voice modulation, like there's line deliveries that you've probably seen in the trailer that are absolutely hilarious in context. So I really want to highlight, I think Leonardo DiCaprio is genuinely fantastic in this movie, and I've seen a lot of reviews underrating his performance, being like, yeah, of course he's good, but like, it's not his best role. And I actually was really impressed with him here. I thought this was great. This was really fantastic stuff. And I will say, while we're talking about Leonardo DiCaprio, I think he could have been an actor that kind of went the Tom Hanks route, started doing really safe, boring, dull roles. And I just want to commend him, because I think between Django Unchained, Wolf of Wall Street, and this, he chooses pretty sticky, complicated movies and roles to play, despite how big of an actor he is. For most people, he is the actor. So yeah, really love this movie. Go out and see it. Now let's talk about spoilers. 3, 2, 1. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, please consider getting a membership to this channel. Links are in the description below. For the cost of a cup of coffee a month, you get access to weekly or fortnightly podcasts where I talk about every single thing I've watched in a month, both new and old. So anything on that shelf, anything on streaming, as well as new releases, I go through in a fortnightly or potentially weekly podcast. Again, links are in the description below. Please consider it. And now back to the video. Okay, so what I really want to talk about here is the first 30-40 minutes, because the trailer didn't really tell you too much. It was a bunch of striking visuals. Obviously, the pregnant Tiana Taylor shooting a machine gun, that was one of the iconic visuals. All the car chases were in the trailer, but chopped up. And I thought this movie did a good job, or the trailers did a good job, sorry, of not actually telling us what the movie was like properly about. And when I found out what the movie was properly about, the idea that Sean Penn has had these weird, hard to unpack flings with Tiana Taylor's character that simultaneously feel like she's kind of engaging a power play with/against him, but also he's abusing his power, but also she kind of engages it at times, but also like, did she even really have a choice? Like there's a million ways you could slice that, and we will get into that in a second. But there's the central setup here being that Sean Penn essentially is the father of Leo's adoptive daughter, but he doesn't even realize, right? Leo doesn't know that this isn't his daughter. At least that's what I understood from this movie, is Leo thinks it is his biological daughter. He doesn't know that Tiana Taylor was either taken advantage of or had this fling, depending, again, how you view it. But regardless, like, Leo doesn't know that. And I thought that was such an interesting setup. And then they pay that off even more with the central plot here being, all right, the reason that they all have to go on the run is because Sean Penn's Lockjaw wants to join this bizarre underground cult of like essentially white supremacists, right? But like super underground. It almost felt like a Simpsons skit. You know that episode where Homer joins that underground society, the Stone Men or something, whatever it is. But it feels like a mockery of that. It's this bizarre underground cult that lives under mansions who essentially just hate all minorities. And Sean Penn wants to join this group, which the irony there, because he clearly fetishizes the people he locks up. He fetishizes different minorities. Specifically, he is absolutely fiending and hounding for Tiana Taylor's character, and she knows that, and she plays into that. That whole setup was hilarious, and it is exponentially funnier when you find out that this whole chase is going on because he essentially wants to take out his daughter so he can join this pathetic cult. And that's the thing with this movie, is it's also simultaneously fucking horrific and really, really dark. Like, that is a funny idea on paper, right? He's doing this insane mission because he wants to join this weird underground cult of like old middle-aged white men losers. But at the same time, the process of doing that involves him kidnapping his daughter and then killing her. And you're like, oh my God. And at one point, there's this exchange he has where he refers to her as a mutt. And there is so much hatred in his delivery there. And it's really dark and disturbing. On top of that, throughout the movie, you're watching this like really rich world that's been built, all right? At the start of the movie, there's this opening prologue where it shows the French 75 group, right? The group of revolutionists who set free a bunch of people that were in detention centers. And then throughout the movie, they have all these connections with people they clearly bust free. And I think there's some really effective social commentary in that around the importance of immigration, around the importance of immigrants. The fact that all these people that help our main characters on this quest are people that they clearly set free previously is a really heartfelt and touching commentary and sentiment. But at the same time, seeing what Sean Penn does and how he abuses his power throughout the movie, it is kind of funny given how pathetic his virtue is, how pathetic this ultimate goal is, right? Just to hang out with a bunch of losers underground. But at the same time, you're watching him ruin people's like high school dances. You're watching him falsely arrest people. You're watching these exchanges where he says, oh, we're just going to plant drugs in a bunch of different chicken shops. And it's like all really fucked up, dark stuff. And yes, it's simultaneously funny because Paul Thomas Anderson is such a talented writer, but you're really sitting there with like a pit in your stomach. But circling back to that prologue, there's so much to unpack here. And I think that's the richest part of the movie for me. And I think it just took me a second in the back 2 hours, right? After we jump forward, it took me a second to just go, oh, we really are just focusing on this kind of like chase sequence that happens over the course of like a few days at the very most. But in saying that, that opening chunk was so interesting because you are sitting there being like, okay, it seems like on paper, like Teyana Taylor was kind of leaning into this power play. Like she opened the floodgates, it seemed at least, by demanding that Sean Penn pops a stiffy in that moment, right? She's kind of being like, yo, get it up for me or I shoot. And that clearly crosses some wires for him. But at the same time, who's to say that he didn't already have all these wires crossed in general? And who's to say she didn't see that, sniff that out from him, and then kind of like use that to her advantage? It seemed like simultaneously, what I found interesting is there's two ways you can kind of slice this. Teyana Taylor's character is leaning into this. She is using him to get out of jail free, essentially using him. She's kind of leaning into the lust he has over her, the fetishization he has over her in order to, you know, let the bomb stay in the roof and get away with things. But what I found interesting was all of these characters were really hard to pin down morally. Like I thought Teyana Taylor was quite a complicated character as well. Frankly, I didn't think her shooting the security guard was a necessary evil. I didn't look at that as sort of a like, oh, damn it moment, like you had to do what you had to do. I was pretty horrified by her shooting the security guard. And I think looking back on the movie, it's almost more horrifying. She shot this security guard that's essentially just doing his job and way less part of the problem than Sean Penn, who she has been knocking boots with. But again, you can look at that another way and go, okay, maybe she's only knocking boots with him because she's scared of what happens if she says no. But I think what's interesting about the presentation is in these sex scenes, she is the dom. It seems like she is kind of enjoying it, but how much of that is just a power play? How much of that is just under coercion? I think that's what is really interesting. And I will fully acknowledge there is a chance I completely misread this. Please let me know in the comments how you kind of read their power play angle, because it was interesting. Like he initially says like, oh, if you want your friends to stay free, if you want to make sure I'm not going to fuck over your friends, like meet me in the hotel tonight. So that sounds pretty uncomfortable and kind of like coercion, right? But then you see them in person and she's totally in control. And again, she's not past shooting people. And what I also found interesting is at the end of the movie, they completely dispose of Sean Penn instantly without fear of seemingly getting captured. Like they literally put him in like a burner and melt his body pretty much straight away after gassing him. So that leads me to believe that if she wanted to shoot Sean Penn, she kind of could have shot Sean Penn in the hotel room. It felt like to me she could have shot Sean Penn in the hotel room, and the fact that she shot the security guard, it does make me question whether there was actually some weird enjoyment, at least initially, in that dynamic that she had. It seemed like she was quite promiscuous. They write that into her character, right? She wants to bang Leo while they're setting off bombs, and he seems to be the more sensible one, and it seems like almost what it was communicating was there was a sense of thrill and a sense of danger that she had with Sean Penn's lockjaw, despite how fucked up that is. I think what's a shame is it almost looks like a dynamic that you understand. For a while, it looks like something where, okay, she's allowing the French 75 to go off without a hitch, having these weird freak-offs with Sean Penn, and maybe she's just doing what she has to do. But then it's like this moment where he like cracks the whip and feels rejected by her, and then forces her into this life of kind of like white suburbia, right? She has to like, after she rats on a bunch of the French 75, she then has to go live a normal suburban life, which clearly doesn't work for her. It's something she was pushing against with Leonardo DiCaprio's character as well. There was some resentment there towards Leonardo DiCaprio, and to an extent, even the daughter. And I wonder if that was because she knew that was Sean Penn's baby, like even instinctively. And she was sitting there being like, okay, I don't want to be the mother to this child. Or is it just the fact that she feels guilty for somewhat cheating or somewhat having this fling with Sean Penn, depending how you look at it, and she doesn't want to tell Leo the truth, so it's being projected outwards. And I do think that if it was like a full-blown, flat-out, undebatable assault, sexual assault, I do think Leo would have been told. I do think she would have told Leo, but I think there was part of that where she felt in control and did enjoy that dynamic. That's at least the impression I got. Let me know what you made of that whole thing in the comments below. And I do also agree, like at the same time, if you're only doing it to make sure your friends aren't caught, if you're only doing it because you want to retain that power and you're scared of the amount of power Lockjaw has, is it really a fully consensual encounter? Probably not. And I think this whole fucked up dichotomy between Tiana Taylor's character and Sean Penn's character is actually really interesting, because it feels like something is unsettled for Tiana Taylor's character. It feels like even though she should just be staying home, raising this child with Leo, like something doesn't feel right because of, where this child came from, what it cost them to get there. So she still wants to go out, be a revolutionary, because she almost can't sit in it. And similarly, what I find interesting about Sean Penn's character is he kind of goes on a similar arc where I feel like because he felt initially rejected by Tiana Taylor and she wouldn't, kind of acclimate with him, and like he went to her door with flowers and she was gone and she was like, you're never gonna, this pussy is never gonna pop for you or whatever. He then looked for purpose elsewhere, right? It seems like he almost was ready to continue this weird twisted dynamic and wanted to play house with her in this hostage situation or this like new white suburbia life that was built for her. And when she like wants to run away from that, it's like, yo, this is never gonna pop for you. It's almost like this typical like red pill spiral where he's like, well, now I need to look for purpose, and I guess my purpose is this twisted underground cult. And similarly, it feels like Tiana Taylor was also looking for a sense of purpose. She didn't want to feel locked at home with Leo raising this child that she felt a weird reminder connection to from her like unfaithfulness or betrayal or whatever, however you want to frame it. But yeah, I did really find it interesting when she was turning on Leonardo DiCaprio, because I think he was being responsible. He was doing the right thing. It didn't seem like he was being an awful partner, at least at that point in time. And it did feel like maybe there was some guilt spilling out. She didn't feel right in that home because he's putting more effort than her raising a baby that isn't even his, and he doesn't even know the truth. And again, a credit to Paul Thomas Anderson's writing. I don't think we ever get confirmation that Bob/Leonardo DiCaprio ever finds out that that isn't biologically his child. But I think the point of the writing, the thing that makes this movie so good, is it's kind of an irrelevant thought. He is her father. She finds out the truth. Willa finds out the truth, and she never even tells the dad, because of course she's not going to, because that is her dad. Does she really want Sean Penn being her dad? Does she really even want to like give that space, hold space for that emotionally? Absolutely not. She rejects the narrative. She loves the idea that Bob is her father, and I think that's what's so sweet about this movie. Despite that opening chunk being the most rich to me, being the most dynamic and interesting, I think what the last 2 hours, I think what this whole extended chase sequence gets right is it feels like they are genuinely not themselves when they are apart, when Bob and Willa are apart. I think that's my favorite part of this movie, right? They set up this like visual kind of like, they set up this neat little visual storytelling motif with these trackers, right? When the trackers get close to one another, they know that they're in range of one another. When these trackers start beeping, they know they're like close to one another. But I think it also just serves as this really nice visual storytelling method of like the fact that when they aren't together, they feel far apart. Things don't feel right when they're far apart. And I think the journey of just him getting back to his daughter is really a compelling one. Now, the only reason this movie isn't a 10 out of 10 for me is I just would have liked a little more time with Leo and his daughter before they got separated. I just wanted a bit more of a gut punch. I found when they were reunited, I guess I wasn't tearing up. And I guess after a 3 hour movie, I would have liked a bit of an overwhelming feeling of happiness or sadness or tears or melancholy, or even, like, I don't want to take away the fact that Leo never finds out that she's not his biological daughter, but even her being torn up by what Sean Penn said to her, or being really horrified by how she has come from someone filled with so much racial hate and prejudice. Like, I just wanted just a little bit more. Something, all right, just a tidbit more. But I think at the same time, she is similar to Tiana Taylor's character, right? She's a tough cookie, and maybe she's not the type of character that's going to have these big outpours of emotions. But that's my one thing with this movie, is when the extended chase wrapped up, I just didn't feel as much as I wanted to. I was kind of like, oh yeah, that was pretty cool. Now, in saying that, loved that whole hill car chase. I thought that hill car chase was excellent. It was actually kind of low key, all right? Steven Spielberg really hyped up the action in this movie. And I didn't mention it at the start that much because I actually don't think you should go in expecting this insane level of action. Steven Spielberg was like, oh, there's way more action in this like first hour than the rest of your career, Paul. It's insane. And like, I initially was like, holy shit, this movie's going to be epic. But now that I've seen the movie and it was kind of just like a pretty cool car chase and the rest was just like typical storytelling, I was sitting there like, oh yeah, well, of course compared to Phantom Thread and Magnolia, this has the most action of his career. Like, he doesn't make action movies. Now, in saying that, the car chases are really good and the opening is really exciting, but don't go in for this for like insane action spectacle. And the reason I say that is I actually thought the low-key nature of the end car chase was kind of my favorite thing about it, all right? So I felt like I was misled. People were talking about how insane of a thrill ride this was and how insane the action was in this movie. And no, I didn't think the action was insane. But I thought the way they execute a really low-key, grounded, realistic car chase was good. She essentially just like plays with hills and tricks this guy chasing her into like glaring into the sun and then crashing into a parked car. And I kind of liked how low-key it was. I really appreciated that somehow Paul Thomas Anderson, just with good framing and good shot composition, makes a really low-key car chase feel super huge and exciting. And I loved the end for Sean Penn's character. I thought it was just absolutely wonderful. He gets what he wants. He gets in this high office, and it almost feels too good to be true. It's this beautiful office with like nothing to do. Like, it almost feels like a nice little setup, and then he gets gassed. This movie is just full of great sequences. I love everything with Leo trying to find the passwords, remember the answers to the passwords. Oh, I haven't even mentioned Benicio del Toro has a great little supporting role playing Sensei. That was fantastic. That was just like really fun side characters. I really can't knock this movie this much. Truthfully, I just wish I connected with the daughter character more. And I found the mother character, Tiana Taylor's character, so infinitely compelling and interesting. She's simultaneously a incredibly powerful character, both emotionally and like, yeah, sexually. Like, there's this free flowing energy to her character that I found super compelling. And I even found her a little morally questionable at times. Like, I was pretty pissed off that she shot that guard, but didn't have the chutzpah to shoot Sean Penn. And I was a bit like, oh man. And then she sold out the French 75. And like, Leonardo DiCaprio has talked about in interviews that his character is upset with her to an extent. He does feel abandoned and feels a multitude of different ways. And that's how I felt. So I thought the movie did a really good job of making you understand her in a very short amount of time, what she was about, and leaving you with some questions, the same way that Bob and his daughter would have some questions. And that brings me to my favorite moment of this movie. I've talked a lot about how, maybe I want a little more emotional punch from this movie in order to give it a 10 out of 10. Right now I'm at a 9 out of 10. But the one scene I think where it was actually nailing it, and I almost wonder if this movie would have been maybe strengthened by having this scene at the end. So maybe, after everything's all good again, Willa goes back to school, and then we have that parent-teacher interview scene. I think you could have ended the movie there and I would have teared up. For me, that was maybe my favorite scene in the movie, aside from all the Sean Penn cult stuff and the weird freaky sex stuff at the start. I loved the scene where Leo was just crying because he was really happy that Willa was like a smart cookie. I thought it was a really effective scene, really emotional, tells you everything you need to know about him. And I'm almost wondering if it would have been better having at the end, because then it would have, you know, this insane journey they've been on and you felt that journey every step on the way. But yeah, really like that scene. Really like that scene. I thought Leo shines. I think all of his dialogue's really chewy, and he's just constantly jumping from simultaneously like a super responsible parent to also like a real loose unit. And I find what he chooses to care about really, really funny. Like he'll drink drive, but then he'll really care about other things that feel really like authoritarian. I will say though, people described him as a paranoid character. I think given their situation, given the rabid dog that is Sean Penn loitering around, and given the world they've come from, I actually don't think he was overly paranoid. I think he was properly paranoid. I think he was just having an appropriate response to the situation. I would be losing my shit probably more than Bob. Bob, that chase scene where he fell like face first, he missed the jump and fell down the tree. All of that was really good. But yeah, I just thought this movie's commentary on race relations was really effective. It made Sean Penn's character simultaneously feel like a sissy little baby, right? Like he's a naughty boy that likes getting things shoved up his butt, all right? Like they're playing with some like pretty funny ideas and they're trying to simultaneously emasculate him, but at the same time, he's fucking jacked. He's very intimidating, and he's also intimidating with the amount of power he wields. Like the amount of stuff he gets people that work for him to do. A great running gag throughout this movie is that everyone Lockjaw is a funny name, but Lockjaw also deals with a bunch of other, you know, US government officials, and they all have names like Foreskin and Toe Jam and all these ridiculous names, but like, and all of them like do not realize how silly they sound, right? That's like a consistent gag, is they are constantly the butt of everyone else's jokes, but they don't get it, all right? Like Sean Penn thinks he looks really tough in this tight shirt, and then Willa makes fun of him for it. But one thing I will say is, even though it's a consistently funny character, and sometimes you even felt, it's weird. Sean Penn's just such a good character that even at points you kind of, like at the start of the movie before he turned really gross, you're kind of like, oh, he kind of likes Tiana Taylor. He's bought some flowers. He's doing he's just a dude. And then it leans in, like it's kind of almost like a funny loser character that you almost feel bad for. And then it leans into this ugly side, this ugly nature. And I think Sean Penn also just works as this really clear and obvious kind of visual metaphor for America's treatment of minorities in general, almost America's relationship to African Americans, right? We're going to appropriate your culture. We're going to take what we want from you. With Sean Penn, it's a physical nature. And then when you don't play ball the way we want you to, we're going to demonize you and villainize you and punish you. Like watching Sean Penn shift from like worshipping the ground that Tiana Taylor walks on, right, worshipping like her punani, for lack of a better term, to completely turning on her and threatening her life and bragging to her daughter, his daughter too, about putting her in the ground, putting her in a box, and referring to Willa, who is 50% him, as a mutt, is awful. And the way that this underground group talks about minorities and about their overall mission is incredibly horrifying, but simultaneously, like, you can't help but get this like laugh that you don't want to laugh. Like Paul Thomas Anderson's such a good writer that he gets these really dark, visceral gut punches. It feels like it's playing with the same comedic, simultaneously horrifying language that Quentin Tarantino was doing with Hans Landa from Inglourious Basterds, right? This incredibly effective laugh in 1 second and almost liking them for a second, and then being like, wait, you're fucked. You know, I've always found it a testament to Quentin Tarantino's writing that in Inglourious Basterds, there's a point where you almost feel bad for Hans Landa for like a split second, and then you go, wait a second, that guy's an absolute monster. And this movie constantly does this thing of making Sean Penn, when he's not being an absolute menace, kind of like, you know, just this goofy ass dude. And then you remember, and it visually shows you just how horrifying he is. So yeah, I think Sean Penn and Tiana Taylor are the MVPs character-wise from this movie. That was more what I expected from a PTA movie. These characters that you can slice a bunch of different ways, and it's unclear in a really satisfying way. Like you can really think and unpack all their motivations. Whereas I found Leonardo DiCaprio and Willa's character a bit more simple, but again, to ride at home as a joint pair, just incredibly emotionally compelling. So yeah, this is like a great movie, guys. This is a fantastic movie, easily one of the best of the years. It's probably at number 4 or 5 for me, but this is pretty much as good as it gets. This is pretty much as good as it gets. What I do find interesting about this movie, though, is if you liked One Battle After Another, I can't guarantee you're going to like some of Paul Thomas Anderson's other movies. Like, straight up. It's not like I can just be like, yeah, go check out There Will Be. Like, absolutely. If you're a movie fan, you need to see Phantom Thread and There Will Be Blood and Magnolia and Boogie Nights. But do I think you will definitely like them if you liked One Battle After Another? No. Like, they are so vastly different, but I'm wondering if we're entering a new era for Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm also just so hyped that Warner Brothers gave him so much money. And you know what? We knock on big studios all the time, all right? Everyone loves A24. Everyone loves to knock big studios. We need to give credit to Warner Brothers. Sinners, Weapons, One Battle After Another. The new Final Destination was a bit of a banger. There was something else. The new Final Destination was a bit of a banger. And on top of that, I thought Superman was excellent. Warner Brothers has just had a monumental run this year. And Sinners and One Battle After Another will probably be the mainstream Oscar frontrunners next to stuff like Sentimental Value, I reckon. But yeah, thank you so much for watching, everyone. Please consider getting a membership to this channel. Links are in the description below. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much, and have a lovely day.